One of the most instructional videos I came across on YouTube when I first started freehand sharpening was by MrEdgy, and it's called My Sharpening Technique. In it, he describes the way he sharpens knives, and I pretty much took most of my technique based on what he shows in that video. I want to kind of share with you guys what I do and what's happening while I'm doing it. So any of you that are curious or wanting to get into freehand, maybe this will help you out. I'm just going to go ahead and run through it, talk it out, and then I'll explain it step by step once I've gone through everything. So the first thing I do is I put the knife at a 45-degree angle on the stone. From there, I use my left hand to help steady the knife by placing it at the tip. My right hand is putting just a slight amount of pressure forwards to help keep the knife in the same position, and from there I just let the knife follow its own curvature from the base to the tip. And all I'm doing is I'm just putting the slightest amount of pressure forward when I feel that the knife is starting to get off angle. For the most part, my hand is relaxed and the knife is following its own curve. But every now and then, you'll feel the knife start to drift one way or the other. And when you do, it's just a matter of slight pressure forward to get it back on track and keep it where you want it. Now, this isn't an exact science. There's a little room for play here. All freehand sharpening creates a little bit of a convex, so don't worry. You're not going to be perfect. Nobody is. Main goal is to just get an edge on the knife. And then I do the same thing on the other side. Keep my hand on the tip just to help create stability and to stop it from wobbling. I use a slight amount of forwards or backwards pressure depending, and I let the knife follow its own curvature. When I feel that it's drifting one way or the other, I just apply a little pressure, forwards or backwards, whichever way it's drifting, get it back on track, and then I relax. I let the knife follow its own trajectory. I let it follow its own curve. When I want to grind quicker, I'll place with my left hand pressure down at the choil, and I'll start to work my way up the knife blade, grinding in short patterns. So it looks like this. What I'm doing here is I'm putting pressure in specific points. I'm still letting the knife follow its own curvature, but I'm doing it in shorter strokes. I'm still applying forward or backward pressure if it starts to get off angle, but because my finger here is putting downward pressure on the knife, not a lot of forward or backward pressure is needed from my right hand. It's basically just there to move the knife back and forth. Every now and then I will feel it start to keeter off one way or the other, and then it's just a matter of adjusting, and it's really not even much of a conscious decision. It just happens. You'll start to feel it moving and you'll just compensate for it. It's a very natural thing. There's nothing difficult about it. And once you realize that the knife will follow its own curvature, and if you let it do its own thing, it pretty much sharpens itself. All you got to do is be there to keep it on track. Same thing for this side. I'll put pressure downwards, start a back and forth motion, and then move my way up the knife. When I get to the belly or the tip, I'll raise my hand to get that entire curve, like that. When I've gone through The scrubbing pattern, I usually like to finish with long sweeping strokes just to help blend everything in. And that's pretty much my entire sharpening technique in a nutshell. There's really nothing difficult about it. There's no magic behind it. It's just applying pressure in the points that you need it to be applied and letting the knife follow its own curve. Now the goal for me is to grind the knife to a burr. And what a burr is when you sharpen on the side of the knife until the steel on the side that you're sharpening, the steel will wrap around the opposite side because you're grinding on this side. So you're grinding the steel on this side, and as you do so, the steel will start to curl up on the opposite side. Once it starts to get a burr, you should be able to feel it with your fingers. And a lot of times I'll use the middle of my thumb because it seems to be the most sensitive, and I'll be able to feel it. When I've got the burr on one side and it goes from heel to tip, I'll then flip the knife over and do the same thing. I'll grind that side until I get a burr, and from that point I know I'm either ready to move on to another stone, or I'll cut the burr off on the stone I'm using, strop the knife, and I'm ready to go. Now Cliff Stamp and one of the guys in his forums created what they call plateau sharpening. And what that is they cut the edge of the knife off on a stone so that when they view it under light like this, they'll see a reflection where the edge is flat. They'll then sharpen the knife until that reflection disappears. From that point, they can either go to a finer grit stone, or on the stone that they're using, they can create a micro bevel, which is where they raise the angle up a degree or two, create just 4 or 5 quick, short, light passes just to hit the apex of the knife and create that final cutting edge, and from there they're good to go. Now that is a least wasteful way to sharpen. You're not creating a excess amount of steel removal by creating a burr, but it is an advanced technique. Now I've tried it myself many times. I can do it occasionally, but I'm not consistent at it. Because I'm not consistent at it, I'm not a fan of that way of sharpening. For me to get a sharp knife, I have to grind to a burr, and I have to do it on both sides. If I don't, chances are I'm going to miss the apex and my knife won't be sharp. If that's something that sounds interesting to you or something you want to get into, I would highly suggest you check out Cliff Stamp's YouTube page. He describes the technique and even demonstrates it, as does Stephen Wolf. But for me personally, I would rather grind to a burr just because that's the way it works for me. And that's the thing about sharpening. It's a very personal thing. You have to find what works for you. If grinding to a burr works, then by all means do it that way. If you're okay and are able to do plateau sharpening and that works for you, then by all means do it that way. Once you get into it and you really start understanding what's going on and the mechanics of it, it becomes a very meditative kind of thing. There's a lot of Zen-like qualities to it, and it's just a very enjoyable experience. I don't know how better to describe it than that. That's pretty much my entire technique though. If you guys have any questions or whatever, just leave me a comment down below and I'll try to answer them as best I can. Thanks for watching.